There we go. So thanks, Chris. I know Chris is planning to stick around. He's got another session. He'll be doing a panel tomorrow morning on big data. And certainly you can visit the Oracle booth behind us in the Cloud Showcase. They've got some comfy couches there. I also want to just take this time to thank our other top-tier sponsors, IBM, SafeNet, Dell Boomi, and Grant Thornton, who you can also visit back in the Cloud Showcase. Now we've got a really exciting panel. Each year we've done this, at least for the last couple of years, where we've gathered members of the press together to kind of talk about what they're seeing, what are the top stories out there, and always proves to be a very interesting conversation. So the moderator is actually somebody who started this panel a couple of years ago, so it's only fitting that we bring him back to moderate again. So if I can get Richard and the panel to make their way up to the stage. Yep, come on up. Okay. We're just getting mic'd up. All right, I think we're ready.
Very convoluted path.
While we're waiting, I should also mention that in the Cloud Showcase, there are also power stations. So if anybody needs to power up their computers or their iPhones or iPads, that's available to you. So Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Am I on? Can everybody hear me? Wave a hand. Someone wave a hand. Oh, great. Hi. I'm Richard Dim. I'm with the BondiGroup, which does marketing consulting. And that's about all I'll probably say about myself. This is always a very cool panel. We have I think we got the top of the top today with the Wall Street Journal, BusinessWeek, and Politico. And I'll introduce our speakers in a second. Let me just say that, how many people in the audience are marketers? Raise your hands. So, as marketers, we spend our lives trying to talk to folks like we have on this panel. Today's an opportunity not only to hear what they have to say about what's hot and what's going on, but also an opportunity for you to ask questions. So right from the get-go, I'll cede. We have lots of questions to talk about, but please, if you have a question, raise your hand. I can see you. Let's keep this interactive and let's have some fun. Okay? So starting, let me introduce our panel. Starting from my left here, from stage left, we have Ben Worthen, who is a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. Next to Ben, we have Michelle Quinn, who is a technology correspondent for Politico, a very nice additional perspective as we bring the whole policy view into the whole tech world. Excuse me. And then on the far left, we have Aaron Ricadela from BusinessWeek. Sorry, Bloomberg BusinessWeek to be more precise. Both Ben and Aaron are veterans of our press panel. They've done it before, so they know what to expect. It's Michelle's first time, and I'm sure she's looking forward to it. So having said that, we're just going to dive in. So again, please raise your hands, ask questions, and I'm just going to join these guys over here. Okay, so first question, just for fun. What's hot? Anything you want. Throw it out there from your own perspectives. And this is the only one we'll do kind of in order, so Ben, go for it.
All right, what's hot? Well, the term cloud itself is hot, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, as I'm sure everybody has encountered one way or the other. The other things that are hot right now, Instagram. I don't know. Right now, at least in the world that I'm in, I think maybe this is a brief moment in time encapsulated by the Facebook IPO and everything that's pending there, is that anything that at all touches a consumer that you could use on a mobile device that does something is insanely hot right now. And then, mobile and data, I guess big data analytics is another term that gets thrown around a lot. From my point of view, the problem with all of these things is when something becomes hot, it becomes all-encompassing. And you reach a point where I get calls all the time where it's like, oh yeah, we've got a local social mobile platform, and okay, what does that do? What does that mean? So it's sort of the upshot of being hot is maybe, I guess, there's a topic that you can latch onto, and the downside is that everything gets lumped into that category.
So, and who's hot? Any question? Any feelings within that big world? If you're gonna.
Who is hot?
Yeah.
Oh God, I'll plead the fifth on that one.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll give you a chance to come back on that one. Please, Michelle.
Speaking of cloud being hot, the former CIO of the U.S. White House went to Salesforce.com, and that was kind of a big moment, at least in the Washington world, which is kind of somebody in the policy world jumping to a tech company, but a tech company that maybe doesn't really touch consumers a whole lot. So that was a big moment in DC, and I think what in the Washington perspective, cloud is still maybe hot in the business world, but it's still something to be kind of anxious about, kind of wondering about. Federal government is trying to migrate in that direction to get some cost savings, but there's a lot of resistance. And then lawmakers have the two things that they're most concerned about: privacy and security. And there's bills on both fronts, security breach bill and various privacy bills. And cloud, rightly or wrongly, sometimes seems a scarier prospect to lawmakers. So I think that paying attention to Washington, as this industry is really kind of really rocketing, I would say it's worth paying attention to what regulators and lawmakers are saying in DC, especially on privacy and security.
Go ahead.
Right?
I'll answer in a second, but I actually want to ask Michelle, what is Vivette Kundra, the former federal CIO, working on for Mark Benioff right now?
The last time I talked to him, he is doing emerging markets. Mm-hmm. So he's not doing policy. He's going around the world and trying to find new markets for Salesforce, which is was a little surprising too. He's a long-time government service guy. So how he does, I don't know.
See, I would have thought it would just be a window into government accounts for them.
Right, it wasn't. Yeah, that's a good question.
Interesting.
When he, Aaron, question. So did that set the government back? There was a lot of hoopla about the government's going to go cloud. He was driving the whole thing. Did his departure?
I don't think that. I think that he set things in the right place, and I'm trying to remember. Probably people here know who took his place. And say it again. Oh yeah, Steve Rocco, who comes from Microsoft. Yeah, so no, I don't think there's any change in momentum, and there was a feeling that Vivek did a great job. But I do think that there's some issues about, and people here probably know it intimately about vendors getting certified in the government, federal government world. Do you have the right technology and security so that you can be a service provider for any department, or do you have to go through special hoops per federal agency? And so I'm sure people, but I think the momentum's going the right way because of the cost savings. That's part of the deal. Yeah, good question. So, so what's hot?
So what's hot? The Java trial going on in San Francisco is hot right now. Usually these kind of court cases attract some attention, but this one really seems to have captivated the Valley, and I don't think just because it's dueling testimony from Larry Ellison and Larry Page on the stand. On one hand, this is in no small part about what did Oracle get for its $7.4 billion when it bought Sun Microsystems. And Java revenue was a drop in the bucket for Sun. Larry has pledged from day one of this acquisition to monetize Java in a better way. I think it's also about control of the mobile platform. For Google, it's somewhat about freedom to innovate. Can they do this without Oracle trying to put their stamp on the future of Android? You asked who's hot as well. I cover enterprise technology, so I cover companies like HP and Dell and Oracle and Salesforce and SAP. And so I'll take a somewhat contrarian view. Dave Duffield and Anil Bousri are hot. These are the two former top executives from PeopleSoft who now have the company Workday out in the East Bay. They're gearing up for an IPO, as we had reported last December. Chances are they may raise as much as $500 million. These guys, for now, are coexisting with companies like Salesforce. You could see Salesforce and Workday down the road start to butt heads, so I think that's going to be an interesting development as well.
So just picking up on the Oracle case for a second, the Valley seems to go through litigious is good, litigious is bad. It seems like litigious is now coming back up again. It's in any sense.
Well, you have Oracle certainly being quite aggressive on the courtroom front. There's this case unfolding right now. It's an 8-week trial between Google and Oracle, so we're going to see this one run probably through June. Tail end of May, we see the beginning of the HP versus Oracle case about support of the Itanium chip. And then June 18th, we see the beginning of round 2 of Oracle versus SAP. So we'll see a lot of Ellison testimonies soon.
Right, but so now the interesting thing about that is that Oracle and Google do not compete in smartphone mobile. This is about truly patents and the value that can Oracle get some value out of it. But it's so funny to me because I cover patent issues, and I think that the Valley is bipolar about it, which is patents are terrible. It's too litigious. There's horrible trolls out there after us. It's really horrible. Somebody needs to stop this. Patent reform was sort of a bust. And then separately, it's like, but we will do what we need to do and sue all the way throughout.
Yeah, I would venture that right now a lot of this patent deals and in many cases patent litigation, whether if you look at Samsung and Apple or Google and Oracle, it's so much of it is about mobile, and I think what it speaks to is how disruptive the fact that we can all, access whatever we want on these things in our pockets. And I think there's a broad sense that this is changing things in a very profound way. And while people have ideas about how that's happening, it's still so early on that I think a gut level reaction is let's try to stake out our turf, and we'll do it any way we can. If that means we'll come up with a great product, but at the same time, if here's a mechanism for keeping someone else from developing a great product as well, we'll take that. For a very long time, patents were used defensively. By these large tech companies that would acquire patents, they would develop their own. But the idea was that it was sort of a mutually assured destruction. If you try to sue me, I have a patent, I can sue you. Let's just not go through that dog and pony show. And now, people are acquiring patents with the sole purpose of trying to sue one another and prevent them from entering a market in the first place. So I think that's new, and it speaks to the degree to which everyone sees mobile in particular as a really disruptive thing.
And we're seeing Facebook do this too, right?
Right.
Acquire a defensive portfolio. I think about one last point on IP protection. What's interesting about the Oracle-Google case is it started perhaps as more of a patent suit when Oracle brought suit 2 years ago, and then 5 of these 7 patents were tossed out. Right now, that's taken a back seat. So it's become really about copyright law, copyrightability of APIs, and you get into these sort of fantastically arcane issues about whether you can copyright an API. And the people I've spoken to, including some people directly involved in the case, are sitting there scratching their heads. How is a lay jury supposed to understand these issues? So I think that's quite interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. It's fantastically complex.
Just to follow up on that, the verdict this week on copyright was, as somebody put it to me, a mess.
The jury split down the middle. They said Google had infringed some of Oracle's copyrights, but they couldn't reach a determination whether this constituted fair use. In other words, whether Google had advanced the state of the art enough that it nullified the finding of copyright infringement. So the jury took over 4 days to deliberate on this. They were really stuck, and they still are.
So putting you guys in a really tough spot, because this isn't a legal panel, although we're certainly talking about it. So what's a small company to do? Is the first thing you do, you get a great idea, you have something clever, hire that attorney and start going for, get the patent process going?
Well, I mean, oftentimes if you look at the history of the things that do go to trial, it is the small inventor versus Microsoft or IBM or whoever it is, and typically what happens is it goes on and on and on and on, and the small guy gets crushed somewhere, in this never-ending process. Come up with a great product. Come up with a great product that does something great that people like using, that's easy to use, that meets a need. Figure out a way to make it compelling to people through your sales or your marketing or whatever it is. I'd worry about that a lot more than I'd worry about pitting up in a lawsuit against someone. I mean, the worst case scenario is you'll get acquired before the lawsuit goes to court.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to say I've been hearing lately from VCs that they feel that their companies are getting hit by patent suits earlier in the food chain than they had been before. And it's usually because two giants are fighting each other and there's collateral damage as they attack other smaller players who maybe provide a service or be adjacent. So if that starts to happen more, already lawmakers are kind of tearing their hair out. Why is all this money being spent on litigation? We were supposed to try to reduce litigation with patent reform. We didn't do it. We switched to a first-to-file patent system rather than first-to-invent. But if startups start getting attacked, I think that would be a moment where lawmakers might say, okay, now it's time to start again. We need to really do something to stop this. At this point, it looks like a war with most people being able to get armed fast enough. Facebook buys patents. The one group that was a little different than all this was Twitter. Twitter came out and said, we will never use your inventions in an aggressive, offensive way. I think that's what they said, but maybe they had some caveats in there. That's really, from patent lawyer perspective, that's really fine and cute, but until Twitter wants to go public, then they will get serious.
So just taking it a little bit away from the legal side,
Yes.
but definitely back to the world that we live in, stealth mode. Something, that's another term these days that, there are some companies that say, we've been in stealth mode for 2 years and we'll spring full blown. Others that from day one they're sharing. Now that kind of plays into patents a little bit because you're exposing yourself. As reporters, stealth mode doesn't help you in the sense that you're trying to dig it out. Any feelings about that?
Yeah.
We had this project that went back to independent BusinessWeek days, and we've continued it at Bloomberg BusinessWeek on the web, where we would name the dozen or so best young entrepreneurs every spring. And we try to identify below the radar men and women under the age of 30 who we would do actually a fairly rigorous poll of about 30 VCs or so. Who is it in your portfolio who's under 30 and is poised for a big success? And we would find time and again, as we did this over the years, that a lot of the guys and gals that were being named had these companies that were in stealth mode. And so, it presents a challenge, obviously, as a reporter. You hear from 5 or 6 VCs, this guy is really hot, you've got to check this out. I think rock melt was maybe one example. What does this do? And no one wants to talk about it. How do you profile this?
Do you think it's increasing stealth mode, or is it because it seems like a lot of companies are doing kind of more what you were saying, which is let's just start trying to find a customer base really quickly.
I don't cover startups as closely as I used to, but it seems like the ability to move and pivot quickly from one thing to the next and try to find some customers is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although I would just say that the nature of something that's being targeted at a business versus something that's being targeted at a consumer is different. If the three of us are working on some sort of consumer app, we can get it, boom, put it out there. It's free. We don't have to worry about security or how it's going to work with the corporate network or how we're going to handle identity management and access management and things like that. And even if we're building, a software as a service application for businesses, at the very least we have to have identified those issues and thought about them and have something that we'll say. So it's just typically in my experience talking to people who are starting some of these companies, it does take longer to launch startup that's focused on to come up with a product. It takes longer to develop a product that's focused on businesses than it does with consumers, but hopefully the payoff is better.
It's a longer sales cycle. You can't count on word of mouth. You have to get buy-in from several people. I think the other trend that's going on is the return of the enterprise IPO. I had drawn up a short list. Who's gone public just in the last couple of months? We have Jive, Infoblox, Splunk. We have Workday and Palo Alto Networks in the pipeline. So it's being overshadowed by a certain large IPO, but it's interesting as well.
Right, that whole market's really come back. No question about that, or the whole opportunity. So, hey, doing a little pivot just because this is all about the cloud, and I went back and looked. I had forgotten. It's 7 years since Amazon launched EC2, and I don't know how you all feel, but 7 years in the Valley is like a lifetime. And with no offense intended to any competitors to Amazon, they're kind of Kleenex, right? If you say cloud, you say Amazon. Yeah, what's your take on this world that's evolved now? And I'm talking about the techie weeds so much as cloud in general. Is it overblown? Is it mainstream? Is it still early days?
All of the above.
Oh yeah.
I found that in the conversations I've had with chief information officers at companies, there's been a dramatic shift over the last several years. 5 years ago, everybody had the sense of this thing, cloud, whatever it is, and when we say cloud, we mean software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. We're lumping all this stuff together. But 5 years ago, there was like, this is interesting, but at the same time, I'm really, I just want to go over here and hug my server. And then, I think the economic downturn changed a lot of minds. Things. Just the business case of doing this stuff on the cheap in some cases, or not having to write that giant check up front, it made a lot of people look a lot harder. Increasingly, I find that I'm talking to people who have a cloud-first mentality, that they're going to look to see if they're buying a piece of software, if there is a software as a service option available to them, and only if there isn't will they think about doing an on-premise product. And that to me is a change that's happened in the last few years. And I think even though software as a service is still a relatively small chunk of the overall software dollars spent per year, I can't think of a single person out there who has a on-premise software startup.
It seems like Amazon Web Services has run away with the game when it comes to hosting computing for smaller companies or even departments of large ones. Even Microsoft has admitted this to us. It's interesting, this idea of hosting applications or hosting infrastructure software on behalf of customers. It's one place where Google does a lot of things really, really well, but it's one place where Google hasn't had much traction. Google has something called App Engine. Some people don't even know what it is. That's their competitor to Amazon Web Services. Now, they would say we haven't paid close attention to this until recently, but I had pulled an interesting statistic yesterday from Forrester. They had surveyed companies planning to use these infrastructure as a service offerings. Percentage of companies planning to use AWS, 44%. Percentage of companies planning to use Google App Engine, 13%. And by the way, that's down from 23% last year. On top of it, Google just launched Google Drive. It's certainly overshadowed by other services out there. And this executive named Dave Gerard, who ran a lot of the Google apps, recently departed. So it'll be interesting to see how they square all this and if they want to take a run at it.
Fascinating. I think I read a statistic that said that Amazon has lowered their prices now 30 times or something over the 7 years. I may be wrong, and some may have the right number, but it's certainly it was a dramatic number. No surprise to me. It says maturing market, more competition. We're first, we can do what we want. Now we're coming down. So definitely a interesting world. So on the cloud piece, and again, this may be a little off for you guys, but does cloud become a telco game at some point? I mean, OpSource is now Dimension Data, NTT. Savvis was acquired. Just wondering, at some point, and has become dysregulated, like at some point, sort of as telcos were.
So taking a pass on the regulation question for a minute, for me, where I sit, one of the most interesting things is that right now, you've got all these different companies trying to get at the same place, and they're coming from different directions. You have Amazon over here, you have Microsoft over here, you have Verizon is another one that acquired their way in here, and then to a certain degree you have hardware companies like HP and Dell. All of these guys are more or less trying to do the same thing and get to the same place, and they're coming from such different backgrounds. I couldn't tell you who wins. I think that there will be a large degree of consolidation at some point in the future as this begins to shake itself out, and I think certain approaches will prove not to work and will get consumed by others, but that could take a long time, and I have no idea who is best positioned to end up when we think 10 years or whatever it is from now as those cloud infrastructure providers. I don't know who that's going to be.
Yeah, I probably should have been clearer too, separating private and public. Yeah. And I was thinking more on the public side, although that integration or that hybrid cloud seems to be where everybody's trying to focus a little bit.
I was thinking about, back to your previous points about Amazon and what you were saying about Amazon. If you think about how they handled that big breach last year, the service shutdown that happened. It wasn't a breach, it was kind of service interruption. They really dove deep, I think, in terms of telling consumers everything they needed to know, or even to beyond the point of reasonableness. I felt like it went on and on and on. The explanation, I think that they really kind of seized that moment, and I from a policy point of view, I think that was I think that they recovered really well. That people didn't. They were able to bounce back fast enough.
And that takes you to the whole question of trust and trust pages and availability, and which is, again, not so much new, although I think companies are still sometimes slow to adopt that. From your perspective as reporters, is the whole question of trust in this online world and the cloud world an important one? Is it something you see? I mean,
I'll start. I think one interesting question is to what there was always in the history of buying information technology. There's always been a lot of brand equity and a lot of trust in buying from the big established system vendors. Historically, you bought from IBM, you bought from HP. More recently, you bought from Dell. You trusted them to get it right. I wonder in the cloud world, as people build these grids of machines, to what extent do you want to source that from HP or the HP cloud or the Dell cloud? Is there still that much value left in the system? Or do you buy software from VMware or from Microsoft and figure the box has become so commoditized that the software layer is where the value is? So that'll be an interesting question too.
So how does a small company compete, right? It's right. There's sort of no one ever got fired, apologies to IBM. No one ever got fired for buying IBM. That was the same for a long time. Then you could pick another company, whatever. You're a small guy, you're trying to get out there, and no one's ever heard of you. So I don't know if trust plays into that or not, or it's just a technology choice. That's, or I guess the answer is you have to convince you guys, and then you write about it and you get the seal of approval. I don't know. That's a quick answer. Let me pivot yet again. I'm trying to cover kind of a variety of topics. A couple years ago at this conference, we had Don Tapscott as a keynote speaker, and Don's written a lot about the digital, growing up digital, and and the kids who are born with computers in their heads. And he made the comment. We were talking about privacy, and he made the comment that it wasn't that young folks didn't. It wasn't the young folks who were concerned about privacy. They just didn't care. Privacy wasn't something that even crossed their minds. Privacy is such a hot topic. And yet it seems to be one that I'm not sure where it's going. From your perspective, in terms of the worlds that you cover, online privacy, does it matter? Does anybody care, really?
I think that there's going to be a bifurcated answer here, because privacy for a company is going to be very different for privacy for an individual, and the parameters of figuring out what that means is going to be different. From the point of view of a business, I think it matters greatly. I think it matters to people who are making decisions about putting data in the cloud, whether that's through an application or through a hosted infrastructure provider. I think that's going to be a top concern for them. Now, that said, I think that's one that largely has been addressed by now. People that I talk to, at least, there's an increasing comfort level, and if not everyone is comfortable, it's just a matter of time until everybody but the last holdouts are. In the consumer world, I think that's an interesting one. The Wall Street Journal last year ran this giant series called What They Know, and it was all this, when you go to a website, here's all the advertisement stuff that everybody finds out about you. Here's what you're saying on Facebook and how it can relate to this, and it's kind of incredible. Even without knowing your name, they might know that you're a 62-year-old single woman who lives in New Hampshire who enjoys backpacking and baking cakes, and then they'll target information at you that way. The lingering question is, so what? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't think there's examples, at least that we've known about or written about, where the fact that information is known about that woman has somehow got her on the terror watch list and incarcerated in Guantanamo. There's that connection hasn't happened yet, and so there's these examples of the kids who go out partying and then they put their photos on Facebook and then they get fired or they don't get the job in the first place. I think that's more of a cultural question, and I think people might learn that at some point about how to balance that. But I think it's very much an open question from an individual standpoint about whether privacy matters. For me personally, don't touch that. For me personally, it bothers me on some sort of intrinsic level that the Big Brother is watching element of it. But again, what actual damage and harm have I suffered as a result of that is less clear.
I thought that was a great series that the Journal did, and I read many of those stories, and it was pretty informative. I think one big takeaway from that was, while you can certainly be careful about what you do on Facebook, and sort of the photos on Facebook question is, I agree with you, it's on an individual level. As people get older, as they start to go into the workforce, they get smarter about these things. I think what's more nefarious is the fact that so many of these sites have tentacles into one another. You're leaving this trail of breadcrumbs around the internet. This can all be triangulated. It's really difficult for consumers to understand how this works. How do you control something whose mechanisms you can't understand?
Well, is it a benefit to me if I go and I go to a website and the advertisement that I see is something I'm interested in? I don't really know. On one hand, I think it's going to creep some people out, and some people are going to say like, "Oh, this is great. I was looking for Cliff Bars," and click the ad. And that's probably a cultural one. To flip it over to the policy standpoint, it's probably an area in which the technology and the uses of it have vastly exceeded our ability to set policy.
For it. Well, I'm just also thinking about, there's a Pew study recently about search, and the study said that people are using search more than ever. Multiple searches every millisecond, and yet their feelings about being tracked or having their privacy violated, or how they see their perception of violation, is really high. They like using everything, they like relevancy, and they hate, in general, a huge majority, and it is divided by age. Education, it was divided by education too. The more educated the person, the more yucked out they were about being tracked, and people who were younger and less educated were more willing to say, hey, I don't care.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you have a cool iPhone app, we're probably going to hit, yes, use my location.
Exactly.
Yes,
right,
do this, take this, and so we're at a point where even when we're aware of these things, the perceived benefit of sharing the information and allowing someone to have access to that information is still, it seems.
The perception too is that those moments where you say yes to an app are usually right at a very critical moment. So you make this sort of impulse decision,
When's
like,
the bus
oh my
coming?
God, get me to where I need to go. And yet you don't know the implication. You just worry. So I think that anxiety, is something that lawmakers are aware of and are willing to either make policy on or make headlines with. And that's something I think companies, people like Google, Facebook, Twitter, all the app developers who are in location have to worry about, that they do not want to be tomorrow's Wall Street Journal story about cute little app company in San Francisco. It also is funneling your data back to headquarters where it's being sold to big pharma or whatever. Whatever it feels like we have these stories every couple of weeks. And I think that if you were an app developer, you don't want to be in the paper for those reasons. And I think that there is a concern in Washington that are we going to kill the golden goose of innovation by attacking or really clamping down or creating structures, policy structures around app developers? And there's a lot of policy movement in that direction, both in California and in Washington, particularly targeted on app developers.
What would be the biggest thing that the policymakers don't want them to do? Reach into other parts of your phone, like your address book, or what are they trying to block?
That's a good question. I mean, there was a couple apps recently, and I'm trying to remember their names, where where they did something that was a little bit Wasn't the one? There was one in San Francisco.
Path?
Path, yes. And that was like reaching into phone books. Right. That was the reaching the address book one. There's that. There's a lot of anxiety about liking things on Facebook and how that information goes to data minders. And I'm not even sure how true of it is, but there's anxiety about it. If you like Breast Cancer Awareness Month, how does that information get kind of packaged about who you are? What is your illnesses? What are your sicknesses? And so I don't think that. I think there's the anxiety about it is not based in fact necessarily, but lawmakers are really curious about it. And also, if you are standing up for consumer privacy and you're running for election, it's a quick way of getting some headlines if you're going to take on Facebook. And even though the people who do it are very sincere, I think that if you're any of these companies, you have to worry about that. So you don't making mistakes like Path made, or even inadvertent ones like Google's inadvertent mistake regarding Apple recently. It's basically blocked Safari's privacy settings so that people could get to information that they already indicated they wanted, and ended up dropping cookies throughout everywhere they went in ways that were against the Safari policy. Anyway, that was a big mess, and I think I think it was inadvertent on Google's part. Huge problems. They're going to get fined, and it doesn't help their general kind of good business approach to the world.
Are these fines significant, or is it more the impact on?
This one might be. I mean, I think they just got fined $25,000 from the FCC on Street View. Okay, that's nothing. This one is like something like $16,000 per use of the person per day or something. I mean, it could get into the millions. And it's something that once it was brought to Google's attention, they're like, oh, geez, we'll fix it. They fixed it. It's too late. They got the bad press, they got the bad headlines, and now they're going to get fined.
So I have to ask again, you guys, the reporters, is there something nefarious going on, do you think? Or was it oops, didn't mean to do it? Or is there something, maybe we're trying to push the boundaries? I don't know.
I think people are trying to push the boundaries, and it's something nefarious going on. I mean, I don't think there's a grand conspiracy among foreign governments and the startup community here. And then nefarious is again, it's a perception issue, right? There's a company that I'm thinking of, a company called Rapleaf, which is one of these marketing companies that collects all of this data. And one of my colleagues wrote a big blow about how, like, oh my God, Rapleaf knows everything about you. And the tone of the story was, very frightening, but I guarantee you their phones are ringing off the hook the next day because every marketer in the world wants to know that information. They probably took a PR hit yet at the same time.
Do you know that for a fact? Because I have to say, ever since that story, I feel kind of sorry for Rapleaf. Like when I see the sign in San Francisco, I'm like, Rapleaf.
No, I'm speculating here wildly, but if there's some marketers in this room, I don't know, what you guys want to know that about, everybody's going to your website and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I think oftentimes, what you can do with technology, the rate of change and the rate of innovation there happens faster than our ability to process the full consequences of it. And even when there is the possibility for something nefarious to happen, at some point someone's going to do something nefarious if the possibility of it exists, but it certainly doesn't mean that that's the intent of the person who's doing it. I think this Google case is probably a good example. And a lot of the Facebook, privacy slip-ups, they're probably just doing something, they're not fully thinking about the consequences of it.
So I have one more question. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions from out there in the audience? Because I got the one I have the one I want to have the answer to. Oh, is it yes?
this is, I guess, for Ben, and Aaron, and Michelle, all of you, you're the target of a lot of our actions. I mean, we're all, or a lot of us are in app development here and are messaging around that. Just some quick thoughts maybe from the panel around, what do we do really bad? Ben, you said that when people are reaching out to you, they have the local mobile big data application, and they kind of glom all the buzzwords together and throw it at you. I see that a lot out there. So what should we be doing when we're looking at trying to get press with you folks or get awareness? And what shouldn't we be doing besides throwing a bunch of hot buzzwords out there?
It's a great question, and it's one that there's a difficult answer to, which is that it's really going to be hard. And I think all of us here would love to have written the profile about the next Google or the next Facebook or the next Salesforce.com 10 years before that company becomes explosively huge, that we can look back at and say, hey, look how smart we are. But the fact of the matter is, I think all of us probably get pitched by 50 to 100, hey, I've got a hot new, mobile, social, big data, local cloud company. And just from a pure noise standpoint, it's really hard to get through. The best advice that I would say is that, in my case at least, it's very unlikely that we're going to write a story about a small company that people haven't heard of. And I get pitches all the time where, I kind of sum them up as a company you never heard of does something you don't care about. Always try to be sure that your pitch isn't in that category. If it's a company that no one's heard of coming up with a new version of a product that no one knows about, it's probably not the best pitch. The other one I get all the time, it's like, well, the CEO's really interesting, he skydives. That's, again, not enough to carry a story. But find trends. Aaron mentioned, there's a real wave. This next wave of companies that are going to go public are enterprise companies. It is, as he said, it's Workday, it's Palo Alto, it's these companies that have gone public already. There's another wave, Cloudera, these companies behind that have real traction. And there's a narrative there. There's a story that your company might fit into. Try to figure out, try to identify the stories that we're writing about, and not the stories about this is the hot startup story, but the trends that we're focused on, and figure out if there's a way that you can get your company, there's a narrative that they're working on, tech startups next IPO wave, where does your company fit into that? Or companies, exploring uses of analytics, is a narrative that we might be working on. Where does your company fit into that? Companies disrupted by mobile, workers wanting to access, their business data on these devices. How does your company fit into that? And I would focus on trying to convince us that the next time we write up a story like that, we need to include your company, rather than writing about the fact that your local mobile company has a skydiving CEO.
So I want to hear Michelle and Aaron, but as you guys answer, and Ben, for you. Okay, so first question, email, phone, to try and with the right story, whatever, what's the best way?
I don't care. I answer my phone if I'm at my desk. Okay. I don't really return voicemails, and I always glance at my email.
Secondly, PR agency or direct from the company? Any preference?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
But I think Ben's point is an interesting one, and then I'll let you finish.
At Politico, we care about politics and policy. So if you're not in that world, or you're not part of the narrative about policy and politics in terms of technology, which is, we care about the storylines, just kind of jumping on your storylines, we care about the innovation economy, the election year, and data being used for political campaigns, and then privacy, security are also the big ones too. So if your company fits in that in some way, and like you were saying, or if there's some tension with your company in terms of a federal policy issue. I can't think of anything right now, but tension is always good. And I like email, but I think kind of knowing kind of where Politico is, which is its 5-year-old publication that's intensely focused on politics and policy, would be really great.
So 2 answers. Trends matter and pedigree matters. So to jump off Ben's point, reporters and editors really like to come up with original stories. That's our bread and butter. By the time you've gotten the word not to be rude, but by the time you've gotten the word big data into your email, we've already figured out this is hot. We want to write about maybe there's a subset of this, maybe there's a really interesting application.
Bigger data.
If you hit, yes, for instance, if you hit us with some buzzwords, we know this is a trend. Find something that's really going to happen next in the coming weeks and months, and position your company as someone who can comment intelligently on it. That's one way. Pedigree matters a lot. We recently wrote a story on Jonathan Schwartz's new startup, CareZone. They're a small website that enables adult children of aging parents, for instance, to have a way to communicate, store data, communicate privately among family members. There were no hooks into Facebook, no hooks into Twitter. Would we have written about it otherwise? I don't know. But Jonathan Schwartz was the CEO of Sun Microsystems. Of course we're going to have him in. Of course we're going to have him present to us. Of course we're going to write about what he's doing. So, past lives matter also.
That's a good one. Okay, I think we've definitely run over. I got us one answer from each of you. Play bankers for the moment. What's the next acquisition?
If I knew that, I'd be running outside and writing about it.
Okay, good duck. Any feelings, Michelle?
No, none.
No? Aaron?
Let's find out, does Salesforce.com feel the need to start doing really big acquisitions to hit Mark Benioff's goal of growing to $10 billion over time?
Or are they the next acquisition? So that's the other possibility. I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. So Ben, Michelle, and Aaron, thank you very much. And thank you all. Yes, good, thanks.